And that digital content, I think we limit ourselves by thinking that it's just on the website screen. And so, I actually like to look at digital content more from a digital screen standpoint. So that might be on a website in a home. That might be on a phone screen. That might be in a retail store monitor or a video wall. So we're trying to broaden our view of content and look at it more from a multi-screen standpoint. These screens today are completely independent. Part of our model in this digital ecosystem is how do we actually design experiences that move between them? Because our consumers move between them, but we don't in our campaigns and our experience design. The foundation, it really should be designed to support one person, and that's your consumer, your customer. And if we're really truly going to be customer-centric, then we need to be true and genuine to that. It needs to be needs-based, so what does the consumer need from that interaction? What content do they need, when, and where? So my job is to get the right content at the right location to help them make that decision. That might not always be on our website. Lifecycle-based, talked about that, going through the full lifecycle spectrum. And then digital content-based. So how do we start migrating away from looking at it as online advertising, digital advertising, paid search, organic search, social media? How do we start breaking that apart and looking at it from a content standpoint? So we want that to be part of that experience design as well. And the thing that I think is interesting is that the story that you're telling, at the end of the day, you are telling a story, you're telling a brand story across this ecosystem. And I think your story should continue with each click versus repeat or change. So I think in our category, the consumer is always a little suspect of a bait and switch. So when they read one thing here and another thing there, they start getting a little suspect that you're truly being upfront with them. And honestly, that in part will drive them off-site to get secondary reviews because they're starting to hear discrepancies and they want to validate that. And then sustainment, again, we're big on product launches, launch, and move. We really have to start looking at sustainment. And if you look at it from a content standpoint, then you start looking at it more as a publisher and you think about an editorial calendar and how you're going to actually keep content fresh across this ecosystem. So our user experience design principles that drive the model are user goal and need driven, customer lifecycle based, social integration throughout. We've heard about social media, and I think what's interesting sometimes is it's easy to think that social media and or your brand are destinations. You'll build a special microsite for a big brand campaign, or you get your Facebook, your Twitter, YouTube, MySpace, whichever social property you've chosen to make official, and then you've got kind of off-site. And we're trying to take a view that social and brand are actually woven through that entire experience. And again, content allows you to take that kind of viewpoint. Transparency, got to be transparent. So you got to be comfortable bringing those UGC reviews of your product forward for the consumer. They're going to find them, so be upfront. Simplicity, make it simple, good usability design. Again, they're really looking to you to help guide through all this information, so make that experience simple. And then content and context. So again, understand where the consumer is, and that's why the life cycle aspect becomes valuable, because a consumer that's in awareness has a different content need than a consumer that's kind of heavier in that consideration stage. So how do I get that and optimize that content to help them at that point? So this is the kind of a way that we're looking at it, and that is that web is really a digital ecosystem around content, and that our ability to influence, as those spears go out, our ability to really influence the consumer and their perception and their decisions decreases. So I start actually with the employee sites internal, because I should be able to influence our own employees. And we should be able to actually turn those into brand and product advocates. And we would do that through digital content. So this divide between internal and external communications when it comes to digital content really needs to start coming down. Your customer count, anything that's logged in, clearly you know a lot about the customer when they log into an account management site. Company, website, and retail, we have digital in our retail stores, so I list it there. Microsites, branded social sites, partner sites, and public. We do a lot of partner co-branding and launch. And and so I've listed those as well. So as you move away, our ability, as mentioned, to influence decreases. But the customer is moving through all of those, so I just have to be conscious of that and understand how I help move them through. So one of the things at T-Mobile, I've tried to find analogies on what I'm doing and what I'm proposing to do. And I've probably watched cooking shows too much, but I started thinking that it's kind of like a digital chef, and that your job is to put a series of ingredients together that make a brilliant dish. Or in this case of this image, you're a conductor in an orchestra, and your job is to bring a bunch of instruments together to make a beautiful piece of music. In today's world, a lot of those elements, because we view them as media, they're viewed independently. And so if you're trying to bring them together, it can be a bit difficult, other than they all look the same from a visual standpoint. But they're not necessarily designed to move the consumer back and forth between each other. And so what we're proposing, and we have actually put this into play to a certain degree, is that we look at it more from a content standpoint, and it's what content do I bring together across those life cycle stages. And if you look at awareness, for example, what are we doing in PR, advertising, search, social, offsite events, et cetera, that are actually delivering against that engagement? And what are my metrics at that engagement level, and how well am I performing against those engagements? And if I succeed in awareness, I move them into consideration. If I succeed in consideration, I move them into purchase, on through. One of the other driving forces behind this, actually, is we're always being asked by our customer service group to deflect more calls on our website. Obviously, there's a cost savings there. And in some ways, with digital content, you can provide better experience for the customer, because you can get them richer content than you can over the phone. But what's interesting is that we try to deflect kind of in that support stage. And the reality is that somewhere along the way of awareness, consideration, purchase, and onboarding, I failed to answer a question for that customer, or we failed to resolve something, or we weren't really clear. And so to really get call deflection, you got to go much further up the life cycle than starting in at where the problem is starting. And so what we've done to get this actually up and running is we first defined up front the roles and responsibilities internal at T-Mobile across our different functional groups within marketing, and actually sales, marketing, or sales and care as well, and with our agencies. Establish kind of a one-team mentality, internal and external, and across multiple agencies, and remind them that we're all working for the customer. Establish the digital conductor, which is kind of my role, to see how all these pieces come together. We act and recognize each other as a team. Break down the silos using the customer need, lifecycle, and digital content, because it gives a common element that goes across all of it. You have a common language and a common way of looking at it that we didn't have before. And then, as I've said, establishing metrics at the lifecycle stage versus the pure media level. And then we've got a robust digital content calendar for our branded properties, but also our social sites. And in one case, on a product launch, we actually shared a unified Facebook calendar with HTC, Microsoft, and ourselves. So we've actually taken this broader into our partner relationships as well. To succeed, you've got to really modify your process and associated tools. We're really set up today to launch, and we're really set up in a lot of ways as marketing organizations for publication. A dialogue model and that constant optimization of content across the way requires a different resource model, and it requires a different way of viewing it. And so, we have to start kind of, in our case, we started with campaigns because it's something we do a lot of, and it's something that we can keep optimizing as we do each campaign. So we start kind of with a campaign, and a campaign is designed to cut across everything anyway, so it's an easier place to start. And we started by refining the briefs that we briefed the agency in. So we started briefing the agency in based on life cycle. So our brand agency, who's driving all of our advertising, is now tasked with not just thinking about the awareness aspect of it, but how well that awareness is moving into consideration and purchase. And it's been an interesting exercise to see how they come back with creative and the ideas they come back with.